Hi, I'm Jessica Chariton, and this is Real Estate in the Rockies podcast. I am here with my co-host, Ashley Kappel. Today, we were able to interview Dr. Devin Castendyk, who is a geochemist and local to Salida. We're lucky to have him and his expertise on the podcast today. We talk about water, specifically wells and what might be in our water. And we also discuss mines. So both past and current mining operations and what some of that might mean for our mountain towns. So can't wait for you to listen to this episode.
Welcome to Real Estate in the Rockies podcast. Today our guest is Dr. Devin Castendyk. He is a geochemist and in the Salida area, from the Salida area, and we are excited to have you on today. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to be here.
So we'll just jump right in. Many homeowners in Colorado mountain communities rely on private wells. What are some of the most common water quality issues you see, and what should property owners be testing for that they may not realize?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the latter, and again, this applies to anybody with a well.
Yes, not city water.
City water.
Because that's monitored.
Yeah,
the public utility.
That's taken care of. Department of Health gets reports all the time. They're all in the public record. If you want to know what's in city water, that's public information and relatively easy to find. But personal wells are not part of that at all. So there's, I guess, geochemists, chemists, we group chemicals into a couple of different categories. One is inorganic chemistry, which is basically your metals. Okay, so copper, lead, zinc, arsenic, which I'll probably talk a lot about today, uranium, fluoride, that all goes in the inorganic bin. Then there's bacterial, that's another category. So not a surprise, you can probably guess what fecal coliforms are and where they come from. Okay, it's literally potty talk. But yeah, that's where, your well happens to be too close to somebody else's septic system. All right. And, as your house is being built by a contractor, they have to build it to code. So that is one of the big things that your contractor knows all about, the offset between the nearest septic field and your drinking water well. But that's a category. And other categories would be organic chemicals. So the ones that most people have heard a lot about these days are PFAS. That used to be in fire retardants and in the stuff that they would spray hillsides with to put out fires. Well, PFAS was in that. And in some areas, I know like the Boulder fires that occurred, I think I'm going to get the dates wrong, but within the last 20 years, and homes were sprayed with fire retardant, and that ended up in the drinking water wells. So for like those folks, that's a constituent. But if there's like 120 some odd chemicals in the periodic table in the inorganic realm, in the what we would call the organic compound realm, there's thousands of different chemicals, and probably each one you could have a 20-minute conversation on. Some of them are very common and big ones. You might find them in gasoline, or like it used to be in the 80s, leaky underground storage tanks. That's a gas station where they'd fill up the gasoline stored underground. They would crack, they would leak, and that was a big problem. And some of those compounds would fall under that category as well. So those are kind of the three different bins that we we often talk about. And it really depends on where you're putting your house. If you were hypothetically developing but beside an agricultural area or a place where there's a lot of ranching, and maybe the rancher uses flood irrigation, that could put a lot of the waste products from the cows into the ground. And so you might want to be looking at some of those bacterial components. If you were developing on top of a mine site or near a mine site, or some people buy up old mining claims because they're cheap land and then they put a house on it, a dream home. Well, then you'd get into the metals category. And some people may be, I don't know, there's some development at the bottom of S Mountain. We used to have a big railroad turnaround there, roundhouse there. And there's a lot of those organic compounds that are found in that setting. So polyaromatic hydrocarbons, there's a big mouthful, but basically chains of carbon and oxygen that happen to be carcinogenic. So, those would be another type of chemical that we might want to look at in that setting. So the long answer, as you could tell, it really depends on where you're building your house, Yeah.
So what do we do about this? I mean, how do you, who tests? Where do we,
great,
practically speaking?
Yeah, great question. And I in anticipation of that, I just kind of looked up in Colorado today, like what is recommended. And it is recommended, if you have your own well, to get your water tested.
How often?
Well, the good thing with groundwater, like I've owned my well for going on 6 years now. And, groundwater chemistry is pretty darn stable.
Okay.
Unless there's a big development right beside you.
Or some crazy event that happens.
Some crazy event. Yeah. But that tends, groundwater is like the very slow changing, I don't know, like almost like human personalities. Some people never change, and some people, like surface water is like the bipolar opposite. Like it could be high one day and low the next day. And so they're different personalities, and surface water tends to be very changeable, and groundwater tends to be relatively constant, which is why I've only had my well tested once when we moved in. It's probably coming up probably because I'm inherently interested. I'll have it tested again soon. But how often to have it tested? Some of these questions, I should say, I'm the geochemist, and probably a public health person might have a different opinion on. So I'm not a public health or, in that area. I would probably recommend every 10 years, just to be on the safe side, make sure nothing goes on.
So I think the county, I just got a water test kit from Chaffee County in the mail.
Yeah.
And I think they send them out periodically to property owners.
So they do. And the one that the county gives out is in that biological category.
Right.
So we want to know, is there, again, it's called fecal coliform, is a big category of bacteria, and in that category there's one strain, a couple different strains, but E. coli is a particularly type of bacteria that frankly we've all had stomach bugs, diarrhea. I hate to bring the conversation down to that level, but that's what it does.
All right, that's what we're talking about.
For all of us, for healthy adults, we'll put it that way, it's not a big deal. You get sick for a couple of days.
Get over it.
For a child, for an elderly person, it can be life-threatening. Mm-hmm. So that's really where E. coli can be a big problem. Now, you have to be careful, because if people got that test kit and they got their tests done, they might say, I had my water tested. Well, you had that one bucket tested. You didn't test for the other things.
Yeah, it's like doing a blood panel at the doctor, and you
only do
like your iron or just your cholesterol.
That's right.
But you tell the doctor, I want a full panel, like all the things tested. You got to do the same with your water.
That is exactly a great analog. Analogy. Yeah.
Okay. that makes sense.
So, well, I have a follow-up. I read an article recently about the San Luis Valley
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that said that there's high, because you mentioned arsenic and uranium,
Yeah.
said that because of the drought conditions, perhaps, or I don't remember exactly the reason, but that there was an increase in the levels of uranium and arsenic in that valley.
I'm not specifically aware of that, but I
Okay.
can see that,
Yeah.
So, when you have a constituent dissolved in water, like say this little cup, if I put a pinch of salt in there, okay, I could probably taste it a little bit. If I lowered the water level, if I evaporated it, okay, the amount of salt in that
Doesn't
cup
change.
doesn't
It's
change, but the
potent.
volume of water changes. And so I taste it again, and now I'd taste the salt even more. The same is going on
All
could be
over
going
Colorado.
on. Yeah, if we're not getting that fresh rainwater coming in, the amount of dilution in the aquifer is less, and so the concentration of natural chemicals is higher.
Makes sense.
Right.
So interesting. So we've talked about groundwater already a couple of times. I think it's important to define it or explain it a
Yeah.
little bit, because when we say aquifer,
Yeah.
groundwater, like we
Good
know how
point.
important that they are being on a well.
Yeah.
And we think about it all the time, like, well, maybe it's getting used up, or
Yeah.
the aquifer's low. But
And-
tell us in layman's,
Yeah.
like the average person that's maybe always been on city water before, maybe they just moved to the area.
There we go.
Like, what do they need to know about
Yeah.
groundwater and our aquifers?
Sure
in
thing.
the area?
So, I often run in. I used to teach this subject, and I'd ask my students before we got into it, like, draw a picture. What you think? What I say, groundwater. What are you imagining? And some would draw literally a river going
On the
underneath
ground.
the ground,
Yeah.
right? It's water. Water happens in rivers. Well, that's not the right image. The best image is, imagine a big, huge box full of ping pong balls. All right. And those ping pong balls are rocks, and there's airspace between those rocks. Okay. And if you have that in your mind, now imagine pouring water into that box without the ping pong balls floating away. If they remained in place and the water just filled the space between those rocks, well, you should be able to imagine at the top of the box, maybe it's mostly air. Maybe there's a little bit of wetness stuck on the individual grains. But at the bottom of the box, all of the air space is replaced by water.
Yeah.
So that's what we'd say fully saturated. And somewhere in the middle of your box, you're going to have a line of water. If it was a clear box that you're looking at, you'd have a line of water above which most of the air spaces are air, or spaces are air, and below which all of the spaces are full of water. That is the water table. Okay. And that's exactly what happens in our areas. An aquifer it's actually both a geologic term, but also it's got legal definitions, but it's basically a body of rock or a geological formation. It doesn't have to be rock. It could be a sand layer. It could be something else, but it has enough. It can supply water to a well in a useful way. Some layers of dirt and rock are, they're so, well, in hydrogeology, we call it tight, meaning the water moves through it so slowly that it can't produce enough water to be useful. Okay. You'd have to put a lot of energy in. So an aquifer produces enough water to be useful. And it's one of these geologic units. And so the water table is where you first hit it if you're digging down into the ground. But then you can actually go layer upon layer upon layer, almost like a stack of pancakes going down into the ground. And some layers have water and some layers don't. But the shallowest is where you find the water table. So that's...
So a high water table closer to the surface.
Right.
Low water table, meaning dig a lot deeper.
Dig a lot deeper.
To get down to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And groundwater is always in communication with surface water. Okay. So if you look at something like Franz Lake, you're actually seeing, like when you look at the lake surface, you're seeing the water table. And actually, if you went into the ground at the side of the lake, if you imagine that box of ping pong balls, that's where you would see like the water table in the ground right beside the lake is at exactly the same elevation, or more or less right at the same elevation as the lake itself. So lakes are actually just where topography intersects the water table.
Ah, I like that definition.
He's very good at explaining.
Yeah, you're a good teacher.
But that then gets into it's why the Upper Arkansas Water Conservation District controls, at least here in Chaffee County, controls how much water I take out of the ground, or they frankly allot me an amount of water a year. They meter how much water I use and keep track of that, because if I take out too much, that's taking water out of the surface water, which is highly allocated. So that's the delicate relationship between surface and groundwater.
Reminds me, I need to turn my meter reading.
Yeah, right.
I didn't do my spring meter reading, and now it's June. I just forgot about it.
There you go.
But yeah.
So building on all of that, when what happens to the groundwater supplies when communities grow and develop, when there's drought conditions like potentially this summer, when agricultural land is converted to residential development? What should property owners understand about the long-term sustainability of their wells?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's a really good question. So as I mentioned, I have an augmentation certificate from the Upper Arkansas Water Conservation District that guarantees me the right to access water, but it doesn't guarantee that there will be water. Okay, so I can have a well on my property. It doesn't say
that one more time. That's pretty important.
It's a very important distinction. It grants me the right to have a well on my property, but it doesn't guarantee that that well is going to produce water. Okay, so in a drought, there's a couple of different things that you've mentioned, and some of these have already come true in our valley. In some areas where people have a very shallow well, or maybe just the geological formation is such that when we get less rainwater, again, that rainwater trickles through the box of ping pong balls and recharges the groundwater. If that's happening at a lower rate, and there's still people sucking water out of the ground, it's possible that the water table could drop below the entry point to your well. It's almost like you got a big soda from restaurant, and you only had the straw halfway down into it, and you started drinking and it's full of ice down there, and you actually drop the level of the soda below the bottom of your straw. Now, you and I would just push the straw deeper and keep drinking, and that is something that you can do, but it costs on the order of about $1,000 for 10 feet to go down to drill out your well. It's not, and probably I've got that price tag wrong. Put it this way,
I always tell clients it's $50 a foot.
There you go. That's a better
to drill.
Okay.
So that's a good calculation. If you're trying to get a well on a property, you can go to a neighbor and say, how deep is your well? Or just look at the Division of Water Resources website. Look up the local neighborhood's well documents and say, okay, their well is 100 feet deep, $50 a foot. There's your number. So that's that's very rough, but it's kind of, you got
to start somewhere, and looking at how deep your neighbor's well is a great place to start,
because the water table is probably about the same across that area most of the time. Unless you're up in Maysville, and then it's cuckoo. So you know.
So drought can cause somebody's well to go dry. I have a shallow well, and when we bought our house, I knew that it was a shallow well, and I said to my wife, hey, we may have to remount this well in the future if the water level
done that yet?
drops. No.
What when you say shallow, what?
Oh, well, what is it? I think it's...
Are you less than 100?
It's 140 to 180.
See, mine's only 75.
Yeah. So that would
Mine's
be
very shallow.
that would be pretty shallow. But it depends on where you are. You
Well,
know?
we've noticed this year.
Yeah, you have noticed.
Oh, you like water pressure or?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, hopefully get through this year, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Then I think other people with similar depth wells are probably thinking the same thing because we've talked to our neighbors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, you could go deeper, but so the other question you asked is what happens with development. When I look out, general rule of thumb, there's hydrogeologists listening are going to say it's not always true, and it's not always true.
I don't know if we have any hydrogeologists listening, maybe.
If your water, if you stand outside of your house, stand on your well and look uphill, that's where your water is going to be coming from. And when I do that at my house, I'm looking across the road at a very large ranch that irrigates. All right. So probably if I had a tracer in, and I don't, nobody does, but if I could put like a drop of food coloring in that rancher's irrigation system, it's going down into the ground, moving horizontally and coming into my well. And I would see that happen. Well, what happens, like if that's a portion of my water supply, if that rancher were to sell her or his ranch and it becomes developed, well, suddenly that water is not being put back into the ground. Instead of being what we call recharge. Again, that's pouring water into the box. That might get developed and we put more straws down into that box and more people sucking out water. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch, less water going in, more water going out. That could definitely affect the depth of water that I'm drawing from and might require me to drill a new well. So development, that's how development could affect things. Yeah.
So we're really thinking about, we have to be thoughtful about development in our valley and in other valleys in Colorado just because of this whole issue.
Absolutely.
I think something I've celebrated a bit is when I see developments going up and the cities actually annexing those areas into city water and sewer, because that means there's not more holes being punched in the ground as you described it. So I know that a lot of people are like, oh, another development or the city's annexing more property, but they have to annex it to put on the city utilities. And it's a fine line that we need to learn to balance. Not everybody could be on a well. We won't survive that way. And definitely not larger scale developments or big neighborhoods, big sprawling neighborhoods. You can't have 50 new wells out there and still expect, there's some people that we have had on the podcast. Shout out to Will Harder, and he was on here and said something along the lines of, there's a lot of water down there, but a lot of water ends up going rather quickly when you have a lot of development as we have here.
And I have also heard that there's a lot of groundwater available. I just heard Greg Felt give a really good talk to Garna and he's now the head of Upper Arkansas Water Conservation District. Really great talk. We should find where that was recorded. I know it was recorded. But yeah, he was talking about the groundwater, and when he served as commissioner, I guess the USGS did a study on that's the US Geological Survey, did a study on our aquifer system. And so I know that our commissioners have looked into this in the past. And if I remember from the new land use code, there's supposed to be a water sustainability evaluation that goes on every time a new subdivision is proposed. Like, are we going to impact the wells next door or overly suck the water dry? So like, at least we're asking some of those questions. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Greg is a guest. We plan to have him as a future guest on the podcast. Hopefully he'll say yes.
He's a smart dude.
Yeah.
So shifting a little bit to mining, which you also know a lot about, and it's still related to water, but Colorado's mining history has helped build many of our mountain towns that are here today. What should property owners know about the environmental legacy of historic mines, mills, tailings piles, and other former mining sites. Like, how does that impact all of this?
Yeah, some challenges. It's not always easy to find information about historic mine sites. They operated at a point in time where nobody was requiring people to keep records, when there were no environmental laws. Pretty much anything before the Clean Water Act of I'm going to get the date wrong, but I think 1969, before that, you didn't have to keep track of these various things. You could dump garbage on the ground, and
that's also when they stopped using asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things changed then, and so it's it can be hard to find these legacy sites, and they pop up in weird locations. Like I was talking with somebody about how in BV near the soccer fields, there used to be a tailings facility. So maybe I'll just explain. When you're mining, you're obviously after the gold or the silver or the copper, whatever resource it's going to be. But that is surrounded by, you're not pulling out pure varieties of whatever element. It's surrounded by what we call waste rock. Okay. Not a very technical term. But that usually, especially for the old time miners, got it's uneconomical. It's heavy, it's in the way, and so it gets dumped probably as close to the mine as possible. And you can see waste rock piles. They mark every mine across the state of Colorado, every historic mine. Driving here, I go by the Sedalia mine, which is just off of 291 on the right-hand side going north. And you can see, piles of rock, just emerge out of nowhere. Those are waste rock dumps. So there's waste rock, there's ore. And you're going to take that ore, which is the rock that has the concentration of whatever you want, and you bring it to a mill. And at a mill, it gets crushed. It then goes through probably some kind of physical or chemical treatment. Just the act of crushing it is a physical treatment. But they used to pour chemicals on it. They still do in modern mining. But the result of that processing is what we call tailings. And there are, again, those tailings were usually dumped right next to the mill. And you can find them in a lot of different sites around Colorado, including this spot in BV that I was talking about. There's tailings deposited there. There's other varieties of mine waste. Sometimes the tailings is an initial form, and you bring that to a smelter, like we have at Smelter Town, and you roast that ore. And what comes out the back end is it almost looks like black lava. And that's what we call slag. And you can, if you paddle down the Arkansas River past Smelter Town, you'll see the slag. It's just right there on the side of the river. Not necessarily overly reactive, but it is a variety of mine waste. Drive into Leadville heading north, and you'll see a big mountain or I shouldn't say mountain. It's about a 20-foot high ridge that's all black, that's slag. So that's another type of mine waste. And often if you look along our railroad tracks, sometimes you see the entire railroad base is made up of slag.
If you bike along those railroad tracks, you end up covered in the slag.
The slag.
Yeah. There's black stuff all over your skin.
Yeah.
So there's different types of mine waste, and depending on what they were mining, depending on the process, each one could be benign or could possibly cause a risk.
And I heard you do a talk a couple of years ago about rivers and how this impacts rivers.
Yeah. So we are really lucky in this town to have Jason Willis. He works for Trout Unlimited, and he is the national mine reclamation person for Trout Unlimited. Of course, they want to see more trout in streams. And so he goes out to abandoned mine sites and tries to clean them up. And he just gave a really interesting talk to the local chapter in BV about a couple of these issues. And so these tailings deposits tend to be very flat. Literally a mill was beside it, and they have a flat pile of sand right outside of the mill. Well, that gets grown over with grass with time, or maybe it doesn't. But if a river goes by that, it can cut the bank, and all of those fine grained materials end up in the water, and they can release metals. And so Trout Unlimited right now is doing a cleanup of some zinc tailings that are right up along the Arkansas River near, I'm probably going to get it wrong, I think it's Hayden Ranch, that's just north of Twin Lakes. They're doing a cleanup there of some zinc tailings because they were put right beside the river. Why would mines put stuff right beside rivers? Well, they often have to use water in their mining process. In fact, all mines use a ridiculous amount of water. They have to move materials around. And what a better place to discharge the waste, but right beside a river. Yeah. So you often
it's like
find this
least expensive.
It's least expensive.
They're just going to dump it there. Yeah.
Exactly. It's why the waste rock is right by the entrance to the mine, because it's least expensive. Why is the, tailings facility right next to the riverbank? Well, they probably just spilled it out. The river is the lowest elevation usually in a region. It's certainly in Chaffee County. The lowest point of elevation is the river. Everywhere in the county. And so if you're discharging waste, if you want to get rid of stuff, you're going to put it at a low point.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
interesting.
so that ends up being right by the riverbank.
So you've talked about this a little bit already, but Leadville's currently looking at cleaning up some mine waste as well. And there's these sites all over. When they do a cleanup like that, and we're downstream from Leadville. So I have read about this. Like what kind of risks are we looking at are we mostly worried about the river? Do we also need to worry about our groundwater? What kind of, I don't know if you know this, but what kind of say do we even have? Because it's not technically even in our county or local municipality. It's not our jurisdiction, but we can be affected by it.
This is a really good question. And I think, you're talking about the issue where there's some historic mine waste. I think it's tailings, and they want to reprocess the tailings to recover gold from it. And I think this is a great issue because this is honestly not the last time we're going to have this discussion. More and more, the U.S. Geological Survey has actually put in a lot of studies into looking at old mine waste and to see if we can recover metals from mine waste. So rather than digging, going to a landscape that's, never seen a shovel before and digging a brand new mine, can we go to places that have been disturbed in the past? They're already disturbed. The waste is sitting there. And can we collect those metals? And so like many issues there could be a positive in that, a big positive. This particular mine has also thought about removing, one of the problem childs in mining across the world is a mineral called pyrite. You'll know it as fool's gold. Anytime you go into a gift shop, seemingly anywhere, there's a box full of fool's gold. Okay. That is one of the most common, two of the elements on our periodic table, iron and sulfur. It's one of the most common iron sulfur minerals on the planet, and it's enriched at mine sites, typically. Big generalizations here. When that's exposed to oxygen and water, it forms sulfuric acid. And in sulfuric acid, you get very high concentrations of metals. The lower the pH, generally speaking, the higher the concentrations of copper, lead, zinc, cobalt, cadmium, blah, 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 a whole bunch of the periodic table increases in concentration. There's some exceptions, but let's just take that as a general thing. So one thing this mining company has proposed is that the leftover gold that they're looking at is bound up with these sulfides. And so by reprocessing these sulfides, that's the iron sulfur mineral, by reprocessing the waste rock, they might remove those sulfides and actually leave the area better than it is right now. So those are some positives. But like anything, there's always the potential to do it better and to do it worse. I have not seen this company's plans. I can't speak to the detail. But I know, one should always be asking these questions, like, what's the effect going to be on water? Every company knows that question's coming, and they try their best to minimize the impact. But we should know in general, though, like that question, be it this mine in Leadville or maybe it's somewhere else, I know that in the summer I've seen a helicopter flying up and down our valley with a big, long pipe on the nose, and that's doing geophysical surveys, and it's looking for more metal deposits in this area, I suspect. So the mining has happened here in the past. It's probably going to happen here in the future. It is going on up at Climax, which is not terribly far away. No. And there are better ways to do it. Climax seems to do a really good job managing their water. So it is possible to have mining and manage the water impacts well. And unfortunately, there's a lot of examples where it hasn't been done well. And that's what sticks in most people's minds. It's like, we don't want environmental disasters from mining. It is possible. And no one denies that. It puts us on guard and makes us make sure that it gets done well if it gets done.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the technology has improved so much too, that when you're talking about going back to sites and doing cleanup, but also looking for those metals again, it's like, well, they've got to have a better way to do it now than they did 100 years ago. Yeah. Right. So that's hopeful to me. That it won't damage the environment, damage our water.
And it's also worth noting that, probably back in the 80s, there was like a dead zone in the Arkansas River south of Leadville, due to all of the mining. And today it's a gold medal trout stream,
Okay.
And these systems, I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, but, it has come back and rebounded.
And so has Leadville.
So has Leadville. Yeah.
It was a rough place with a lot of mental and physical health issues because of the water. For many years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking ahead, if you could give one piece of advice to property owners, local governments, community leaders about protecting water resources in our communities in Colorado, what would it be?
So to fellow well owners, get your water tested. I think, you don't have to do it that often, but it's a healthy thing to do, and make sure that you're getting like the full spectrum. I didn't answer this question before, but the state has a water testing service you could go to. It's the Colorado State University Soil and Water Lab. It's actually right next to where they hold the stock show in Denver. That's where their lab is located. Beautiful facility. But they offer reasonable prices for drinking water testing. They've got a panel that they look at. There's also private companies that could do water testing here in Salida. Culligan is somebody that, they're right down on Oak Street. They do water testing, and I've seen their results. They do a full panel of, well, I would say, you're never going to have everything tested, right? Because there's just thousands of things you
test
could
for.
test for, but like they have what looked to me to be about 100 or so different analytes that get looked at. And, the more you could look at stuff, the better. The one caution, if you go with a private company, they are always going to be trying to sell you something after. So, you need a water softener. Oh, you need a,
So they test for
reverse
so many
osmosis unit, like that's, but, just bear that in mind, and discuss the results before, making a heavy investment based on those findings,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be my advice to well owners. My advice to the county, I would love to see water quality as something that gets factored into this water sustainability when we are looking to develop a new area, when it comes before our commissioners and they're debating it. I would like to see a full panel of water quality. Sometimes, again, I've seen examples. And I say this, I used to be on our planning and zoning commission. I could see examples where the request was made for water quality and they came back with just the biological sample. And, there's no biological issues in here. Well, that's great, but you're digging a very deep well. And we should all be aware, in our county, we have naturally high arsenic levels in our groundwater. That may or may not be an issue, depends on the concentration in your well. But yeah, some of my neighbors have shown me their results and they have very high, like above the drinking water standard levels of arsenic. And they indeed have gotten reverse osmosis, which is a treatment that'll take that out. So it's something to be very aware of. Our bodies pretty much need a little bit of every element on the periodic table, with 3 exceptions: arsenic, mercury, lead. We don't need any of those elements.
2 out of the 3 of those locally.
Yeah.
We have arsenic naturally occurring in this valley. So that would be my advice for leadership. Let's make sure that we're 1, requesting water samples, and 2, that we're like really digging into that and maybe even seeking out the public health office and getting their view before, allowing, or maybe not before allowing, but as part of the decision process. Should a development go in here? How deep is the well going to be? How is it going to impact water quantity, which is something that goes into sustainability, but what is the water quality? I think that would be a very good step forward.
I think that's great.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, too.
Very helpful.
So to wrap up,
Yeah.
one final question. Is there like a project or something
yes.
that you did with work that made you think about all of this in a new way that you could share with us? Can you think of like a favorite
A story.
that something you worked on or investigated or even maybe taught about when you were a teacher?
Yeah, so I used to teach at the State University of New York College at Oneonta, and I would bring, I think 7 or 8 times, I brought undergraduate students to Guatemala to look at a lake there. And that lake actually had, it's Lake Atitlan, which is a pretty...
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful
cool.
lake. It's gorgeous. But it does have elevated arsenic in the water, and it also has E. coli in the water. And the lake itself is surrounded by a dozen different indigenous communities that like literally trace their roots back to the Maya. They're speakers of Sutuhil and Kachikal, and languages that are the UN even lists as like dying languages because they're just not being spoken anymore. So going there has a very culturally valuable emotional, I would say, experience. It's very, very beautiful area on many levels. Anyhow, we brought students to collect water samples and, to look at the water chemistry. And at the end of our week-long stay at the lake, the students would actually go to people's houses and we would install water filters. Now, these are very rudimentary. Actually, you don't have to imagine, like a Home Depot bucket, 5 gallons, on top of like 2 of them stacked on top of each other. And in the middle of one bucket is a filter that kind of drips down into the underlying bucket. And all that filter did was remove fecal coliform. Okay, so it got rid of E. coli. But for these communities, they're drinking out of the lake, and the water is elevated in E. coli and fecal coliform. And little kids literally have mortality issues because of this, again, of chronic diarrhea. And so I think for me, the seeing my students learn how to install these filters, which wasn't complicated, but that was a brilliant thing, that it's not complicated. They could install it. We could all install them. They're very simple systems, but the look on their faces as they're, in someone's home, literally with a corrugated iron roof propped up against a mud wall. These people probably make about $7 a day. And they have lots of little kids who are all running around and, playing with my students, and, they're setting up this water system. And then we got back to our kind of place where we were staying and sitting around talking with the students about the experience. And like, everybody just got choked up about it, just because it was like, wow, we read about this stuff all the time, but you don't often get to actually make an impact on somebody's life. And that was really impactful. They could see it as they were installing it. They could see the little kid that's going to be drinking this water that we've now
increased the
up.
Chances of mortality.
Yeah.
Of like having a good
Wow.
outcome.
Yeah.
What a great story.
So that's probably my number one. Most relevant, I would say. That's by far the number one issue,
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, we've got some quick rapid fire questions
Okay,
to wrap
bring them
up.
on.
They're
Take
mostly
another sip
fun.
of water.
Yeah. No, they're mostly fun, just to get to know you a little bit.
Right on.
All right. So land with a view or walkable to downtown. If you were to live.
You've been to my house.
I know, but I have to ask the question.
Definitely land with a view.
It is the quintessential Salida question too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
So
I
make the
love
decision.
downtown. Don't get me wrong. And I often wish I was closer, but gosh, I grew up in Massachusetts. We don't have really views. So to have a view was a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was the first job that you ever had?
Oh, my first job was both working, well, technically my like getting through college kind of job, or
We've had people answer everything from like when they were 14 till like first kind of professional job. So what's interesting?
I've been getting through college. I was a janitor once summer. I've been a busboy at restaurants. But probably my first real job, like where I got paid decently, I in college. So in grad school, I had a friend who was an exploration geologist, and they fly all around the world and dig up rocks and try to tell companies where to go mine. And this guy had just gotten back from the Brooks Range of Alaska and was showing me his slides. And I remember saying, Jeff, if there's ever an opportunity to do this, just sign me up. It was one of those flippant comments you make when, and anyhow, a week goes by and he calls me and says there's an opportunity in Alaska. And so I went very close to Sitka, Alaska, and I flew on a helicopter every day to an island in the middle of nowhere and walked around and literally bagged dirt samples in a grid. And that was my job for a month. And it was super fun and exciting and risky and all those big adventure things. But
Good
yeah,
things
that
when
was,
you're in your 20s.
Yeah, exactly. That was, I could say, my first job.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So what would you be doing if money were no object and you could do anything with your time professionally? Or?
Yeah. If my boss ever hears this, block your ears. But I would go back to teaching. I think that would be a hell of a lot of fun. If money wasn't an issue, mortgage payments and whatnot, but yeah, I really enjoy teaching. And I do that a little bit occasionally for CMC, but I would probably see myself doing more of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're good at that.
And tell really briefly, just because we haven't mentioned it yet on the podcast, your current role, your current job. You said block your ears, boss, but who's your boss?
Right. I work for SRK, which is a global engineering firm that specializes in helping the mining industry, getting permits. We have geologists that look at the mineral resources and try to put a dollar amount on what's in the ground. I work on the side of helping the management of different mine waste. So, this rock is, it's got a lot of that pyrite in it, and you want to manage it this way. You want to put it here. You don't want to put it over there. You want to keep it away from water and oxygen. You don't want to put it, on the surface.
Great. We're glad you're helping them.
Yeah.
It's important
it's very
work.
interesting.
And important. Yeah. Then what's your personal motto? Do you have one?
Oh boy, personal motto
or something you say to yourself, maybe
something that you're like.
Well, I like to be really enthusiastic. I don't know that I have a particular motto that I remind myself, but I do. I like being passionate about the stuff that I do, and whether it's jeepers, I don't know, any kind of teaching that I do. I find hopefully by being excited that spills over into other people and helps them get excited.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Love it.
I don't think anyone's ever used jeepers on the podcast before. So I will always remember that word associated with you, Devin. Jeepers, Devin.
Well,
so thank you. Made my day.
Go.
Yeah.
Where can people find you to learn more about this?
So I'm on the board of Garna.
Okay.
So probably the easiest way could be going through Garna. And if you don't mind me giving a shameless plug, I will be teaching.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'm going to be teaching a What's in Our Water class for Garna in August.
Love
Perfect.
It.
Dates to be finalized. That's on me. They've been asking for a long time, and I just need to give them some dates. But we've centered on, I think, early August, and it would probably be what I'm envisioning is like a Thursday afternoon lecture just to kind of give you the nuts and bolts, which I know is the kind of boring bit, but it's like just to remind ourselves of why we all took chemistry and what that meant, but then a day trip, probably driving up to Leadville and looking at some of the cool stuff that you can see up there. There's one big puddle that's a dark maroon color and has a pH of 2, which is ridiculously acidic. But then again, mind you, Coca-Cola is also pH 2, so
so we drink that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when they transport Coca-Cola, it has to have all these hazardous waste symbols on the side. They don't tell you that when you buy it.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Awesome. I will tell my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time. Learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it will inform things that I talk to people about and share with real estate clients in the future.
Cool.
And we'll watch for the work you're doing with Garna. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. No worries. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
This episode is sponsored by Heart of the Rockies Homes at HomeSmart Preferred Realty. We do real estate with heart in the heart of the Rockies and serve Colorado mountain communities, working to help clients navigate real estate in these unique towns. Whether you're buying, selling, or exploring your options, our goal is to make every step feel informed, supported, and straightforward.